Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Good. There's a lot of stories in the paper in the last day or two dealing with immigration. Immigration tends to be a pretty big issue. It's been a big issue for a long, long time, but certainly the presidential campaign has called attention to it. What's happening in Europe and the Middle East has called attention to it due to the mass migration of thousands of people. But the news recently has to do with us and how it affects American citizens, what's happening to our country, what is our moral obligations, because generally it's very easy for people who say accept anybody all the time and give them whatever they want. If you're not for that you're a morally corrupt person. Even though I'm very sympathetic to the problems and I have great empathy for what's going on, I also have a great empathy and sympathy and responsibility to try to protect the liberties of the American people. I want to start by just reading just a couple of headlines that tell you a little bit what's been going on in the media. Here's one. State Department sets new single-day record for Syrian refugee approvals. So it's not slowing up. They haven't solved the problem. There's still a lot of refugees that want to come. Here's one report, it's UN, pressing for alternative ways to admit more Syrian refugees to U.S. And we'll go into this a little bit, and that has to do with how can we bend the rules or cheat or go around the rules so that the American people or the American government will accept more refugees than even what the law says. Now, that's not a good idea. But the other one here is why America could and should admit more Syrian refugees. Well, this deserves a lot of discussion, and we have a very conservative populist approach. We have a very liberal approach of just anybody and everybody. But then there's also analyzing this from a more libertarian private property rights, and that's what I'd like to do today. I guess you've seen some of these headlines.
Yeah, absolutely. And the record numbers coming in. President Obama has said initially that he'd like to bring in 10,000 Syrian refugees this year. The White House has now upped that number to 60,000 that they would like to have, and then 100,000 in 2017. So this is a significant number of people.
Now, they want to always put it on us, and Obama sets the standard. If anybody talks about this and says, no, we shouldn't do this, there's reason not to, he said, he disagrees. He says, that's not what America is all about. Well, what is America all about when you think about our contribution to the problem? They talk about the problem, and if we open up their doors and open up our pocketbooks and do whatever we can and sacrifice even more, if we don't do that, then we are immoral, unconstitutional, or un-American, and therefore we are the bad guys. But they never once asked the question, could we have been a contributor to this problem? When you look at Syria right now, the disaster there, we can date it pretty well back to 2011. Even though there were fights going on and there was a civil strife there and there were people who didn't like Assad. But the real problem started in 2011, and that's when we got involved. And our president was adamant, the peace candidate, the peace president, said, Assad has to go, Assad has to go. And even though they wouldn't tell us exactly what they were doing, we got very much involved. We had special forces, we had the CIA, and it's been going on. And the longer we're there, the more chaos, the more refugees come, and the immigrants come. And now the solution is, we can't solve that. We're not going to change our foreign policy. We're not going to accept any responsibility. What we have to do is open up our hearts and minds and body and purses and take care of it. And they never talk about one of the worst exports that we've ever had. Because after the Cold War ended and communism was more or less defeated, we've exported the successful economy, the mixed economy, the interventionist economy, the planned economy of Keynesianism, where you have central banks and income taxes and all these things. That everybody said, well, America's successful and they're wealthy, and we would impose it. We would go around the world and we would teach them how to set up central banks. And this is why, it's the lack of the understanding of what freedom is all about, property rights and contracts and sound money is all about. And that's why this chaos is here. So then we see these refugees come in, and it's a calamity. So I don't see an easy way out. I know what some of the answers are, but do you have any suggestions on what ought to be done?
Well, you make the great point, and no one who's saying we need to have more refugees, at least no one I know of, is saying we caused the problem. Where did the problem come from? In 2011, like you said, America said, or the leaders of America said, Assad must go. And they started backing groups that were trying to overthrow Assad through violence. So everyone that says it's all Assad's fault, well, he wasn't killing anyone before 2011. He hadn't been 20 years killing hundreds of thousands of his own people. They only started getting killed and fleeing after the U.S. started supporting an intervention with the help of our wonderful democratic allies, the Saudis. So this problem was created by the U.S., and now the rest of us are having to bear the burden of a stupid decision made by the interventionists in Washington, D.C.
Of course, this is related, obviously, to the problem of terrorism. People say, well, it's dangerous because some terrorists can come in here, but they never want to ask the serious questions about why the terrorists are coming to get us. But you know, one thing that they seem to be able to do very well is small incidents can occur here, not too many here, but there have been some where people get killed and people deliberately killed by jihadists. And certainly the big one, so-called big one, which was Paris, it was horrible. But in a scheme of things, when you think about how many civilians have been killed in the last 15 years in the Middle East, you know, it was minuscule. And yet there was a hysterical reaction to this, because every time they talk about our foreign policy or what we have to do and why we have to watch this, it's always, did you see what happened, you know, in Paris? But they never question, you know, cause and effect and how our policies may be responsible from this. And what are we going to do to get people to reassess our policies?
And here's one thing you'll never see in the news. Paris was horrible, 100 and some people killed. But just a couple of days ago, U.S.-backed rebels in Syria had 2 suicide bombings in which as many people were killed in Syria as were killed in Paris. Our guys did this. Nobody reports it.
They're non-people.
They're non-people.
They're non-people. Sometimes they say the Palestinians are non-people too. But, you know, one thing now, it's a management problem. How do you get more people in? And I alluded to the one article there that said, well, if you change the rules, they can get around some of our restrictions. That, of course, came from the United Nations. And some of the things they want to do is get the people to skirt around direct entry, to go to different countries that might qualify under the quota system, and then also maybe give out more scholarships and make it look better. But that's the kind of solution they want. But then they also have this mechanical problems of the lines. You know, he wants to get 10,000 in this year, and he's behind schedule, so he wants to speed it up. But they're improving the screening process, and I imagine what they're doing, and I think maybe the solution ought to be, if they need to screen it up, is maybe they ought to get some more TSA agents, and that would help the people who would like to slow it up a bit.
Yeah, people would give up; they wouldn't want to come. It wouldn't be worth it.
But anyway, they are speeding it up, which means that the people who say, "Look, we don't even want anybody in here because they're liable to come here and kill us," they would argue, well, you're going to speed it up. But likely they will screen it up, but they're not going to screen it up at our airports, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the Center for Immigration Studies did a pretty exhaustive study of the cost of refugees from the Middle East coming to the United States. And a lot of people who say, oh, you're just too greedy, you're too stingy, you don't want these people coming in, they're not getting that much money. I think this report really puts the truth to the lie. And what they've done is they've calculated all of the different alphabet soups that people will qualify for: SSI, TANF, SNAP, WIC, school lunch, Medicaid, subsidized housing, etc. And they've come up with a figure that each household over a 5-year period will cost the American taxpayer about $257,000. So if Obama gets his way, and in 2017, 100,000 refugees from the Middle East are accepted into the U.S., that will be a cost of $6.4 billion to the American taxpayer. That seems significant.
Now, that seems to raise the moral issue. They say that we don't support the moral issue of helping people who are destitute. But even under these conditions, there's a lot of people who donate money to try to help them. But this idea that the government can come on and dictate and distribute them around our country, since there's no such things as state prerogative, and then to get all this money. So under these conditions, who's the victim? It becomes the American taxpayer who is. And I have argued the case for a libertarian approach to this, which would allow a different decision making, but it would not be overly rigid. But in a libertarian society, the decision would be made by property owners. It'd be more like, our household and our property. There's no invasion of immigrants to our houses so far, that they can come in because it's our property. But when anything is collective and everybody owns it and nobody does, and it's a political thing, then they'll say, oh, the country is for everybody, and just let everybody come in, and because we're good Christians and moral people, will steal more money from the American people and give them this huge amounts of money, with families qualifying for tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, that is not humanitarianism. It is spitefulness against United States citizens. And besides, these numbers are eventually going to keep up with us. We pay all this money to fight these wars, and then we come over here, and then we cause trouble, and then we're supposed to pay for all the problems, and then we're supposed to believe that doesn't matter. We can take care of it. We print money and everybody takes our money. It'll last forever. So 10,000 isn't enough, and people argue for more. They want 400,000. There has to be a limit to this, and it won't be all of a sudden we're going to have wisdom in government. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that they're going to come because we haven't addressed the subject of the economic policies which are disasters around the world, including our country now, as well as these wars that create our problem. And then we're just treating a symptom. It's a horrible symptom. But as far as the immediate needs go, is we need individuals to make decisions. We decide who comes onto our property. So people on a true libertarian society, I think immigration would be rather restrictive in that people just can't come in. It's not no place where they can go. There's no collective. They can't get food stamps. They can't do anything. The incentives, but I think there would be a very good work program. Matter of fact, I think it's fascinating in all this discussion and fear with the immigrants. In the last 5 years, the number of Mexican immigrants have gone down. There's more people going home. That might be a sign of what's going to come. If they're leaving and there's more going home than coming in, that might be telling us something. But I think that's what would happen. Workers would come and go, and there would be no promise of welfare benefits. It would be a good way to send some money to Mexico other than stealing it from the taxpayer, and that money would have to come back. What else are they going to do with the money other than buy American products? So it's really not a bad economic problem either.
Yeah. I know we have to go soon, but I wanted to mention 3 really quick things as quickly as I can. You started, before the show, you mentioned to me, I think it needs to be in the show, that all of these humanitarian NGOs, they collect money for each one of these. They get something like $700 for each person they settle. So there's a huge incentive for them to send people here. The second thing is you talked about, we're the heartless ones because we don't want to open the doors wide. Well, we're the ones who said we don't want to start agitating in the first place. I'm sure all of these refugees, or most all of them, would rather be back in their old homes, running their old businesses, going to their old jobs. So we would have, if we would have had our way, they would have never had this. The final thing, you asked me earlier, what would the solution be? I think every American who supported the interventionism into Syria should host one Syrian family. That seems fair enough. They can pay their way, and then it won't be on the American taxpayer.
It sounds fair and moral, of course, but because they would, I'm sure, volunteer to do that. That's sort of like asking, if push comes to shove and they invoke the draft again to go fight a war, will all the members of Congress go? Shouldn't they go first?
Sure.
But no, they're not. It's not likely to happen. But this is a difference. It's a change in policy right now because there's so much emphasis of getting a lot more immigrants in right now, Syrian immigrants, and they're doing it by claiming that we who ask questions about there and believe that we shouldn't add an additional burden on the American taxpayer and the American people and American property, that we're the bad guys, we're immoral, and that if we take that position, the president say, that's not what America is all about. What is America all about? Promoting bad economic policy, running the world with our central banking methods, and fighting wars and imposing our will on all these countries? Is that what America is all about? Well, believe me, there is another answer for what America should be all about, and it certainly is not more military intervention and more economic planning and more destruction of our currency and more central banking. And that, of course, hopefully, we can promote that issue of liberty and freedom for all of us. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Please come back soon to the Liberty Report.